They cornered me in the bathroom, saying nobody will believe you anyway. My sister watched and laughed. Mom told me to keep quiet. But when the video surfaced on Monday morning, everything changed. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Haley, and the story I'm about to share, it's one that has taken me a long time to be able to tell. It's about the kind of family secrets that fester in the dark and what happens when someone finally decides to turn on the light. It's about betrayal, but more importantly, it's about finding the strength you never knew you had. It all began on a chilly Friday night in October, a night that was supposed to be a milestone celebration for my sister, but for me, it became the night my entire world shattered, only to be rebuilt from the ashes. You have to go, Haley. It's your sister's 21st birthday. Family supports family. My mom's voice crackled through the phone, sharp and non-negotiable. I was sitting at my small desk, tucked into the corner of the dorm room I'd meticulously organized to feel like a sanctuary. Fairy lights were strung over my bed, and my sociology textbooks were stacked in a neat, color-coded pile. I had been in the middle of highlighting a chapter on social hierarchies. The irony was not lost on me when her name flashed across my screen. The piece of my quiet Friday evening was officially over. Mom, you know how she is, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My roommate, Sarah, was at the library, but the walls in these old brick buildings were notoriously thin. I hunched over my desk, as if that could contain the conversation. She doesn't actually want me there. She made that perfectly clear last week when I called to wish her a happy birthday. Oh, you're exaggerating, my mother sighed, a sound I knew intimately. It was a sigh that carried the weight of her perpetual impatience with me. What did she say? I hesitated, the memory stinging. She said, thanks, and then, please don't wear that weird sweater you like to my party. It's not that kind of vibe. Well, my mother said, completely missing the point. That's good advice. She's just looking out for you, trying to help you fit in. No, Mom. She was telling me I don't fit in. It's not for you or Dad. It's so you can tell all your friends at the country club what a perfect, close-knit family you've raised. The silence on the other end was cold. That is a very cynical and hurtful thing to say, Haley. Your sister loves you. She's just, you know. She's busy. She has a lot of friends. She's popular. This is the biggest night of her college life so far, and she wants her family there. Popular. That was the magic word, the skeleton key that unlocked my parents' endless reserves of attention and approval. Scarlett wasn't just popular, she was a phenomenon. As the president of the most sought-after sorority on campus, dating the star quarterback, her life was a curated masterpiece of sun-drenched tailgates and glamorous formals, all documented for her thousands of Instagram followers. At 21, she was already more successful in their eyes than I, at 20, could ever hope to be. My world of library stacks, quiet coffee shop debates with friends, and the dean's list felt pale and insignificant in comparison. My parents weren't cruel people. They just operated on a different value system. They saw their children as investments in the family's social standing. Scarlett was their blue-chip stock, destined for a lucrative merger with another influential family. I was the forgotten savings bond, quietly accruing value in a way they didn't quite understand or appreciate. They were so focused on Scarlett's bright future, they never stopped to consider that my own, quieter ambitions were just as valid. I just don't want any trouble, I pleaded, my last-ditch effort. You know how her friends can be. Especially Ryder. The only one who ever seems to find trouble is you, with this negative attitude, she snapped. The warmth was gone, replaced by the familiar tone of command. Your father and I are paying a significant amount for your education, not to mention Scarlett's. The least you can do is show up for your sister for a few hours. Wear that nice blue dress I bought you last month. Be there by 9. And for the love of God, Haley, please try to look like you're having a good time. It would break your father's heart to see you moping in a corner all night." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone, a heavy, familiar dread settling in my stomach. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. I was a required piece of set dressing for the grand play of Scarlett's perfect life. With a sigh, I closed my textbook. There would be no more studying tonight. I walked over to my small closet and pulled out the dress. It was a beautiful shade of periwinkle blue, but as I held it up, it felt like a costume. A costume for a role I was tired of playing, the adoring, supportive little sister. I spent the next hour getting ready in a haze of resentment. I did my makeup carefully, something I rarely bothered with, and styled my hair in loose waves, trying to look like the kind of girl who belonged at a party like this. As I looked in the mirror, a stranger looked back. She looked polished, but her eyes were filled with a familiar anxiety. My Uber ride was a quiet, 10-minute journey across town. The driver tried to make small talk about the weather, but my one-word answers eventually made him turn the radio up. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, my stomach twisting into tighter knots with every block. When we pulled up to the off-campus house Scarlett shared with 3 other sorority sisters, the party was already in full swing. Music throbbed from the open windows, a heavy bass that you could feel in your chest even from the curb. The lawn was already dotted with red plastic cups. Taking a fortifying breath, I paid the driver, got out, and walked up the stone path into the lion's den. The moment I pushed open the front door, I was hit by a wall of sensory overload. The air was hot and thick with the smell of spilled beer, sweat, and a dozen competing perfumes. The music was so loud it was a physical presence, vibrating through the floorboards. The house was a writhing mass of bodies, a sea of unfamiliar faces shouting to be heard over the beat. My carefully constructed composure began to crumble. This wasn't my world. My mission was simple: find Scarlett, say hello, prove I had made my required appearance, and then find a quiet corner to hide in for the next 90 minutes before I could make a clean getaway. I started squeezing my way through the packed living room, murmuring a constant stream of excuse-me's. People glanced at me, their eyes scanning me for a brief second before dismissing me as a nobody. I was invisible, and for a moment, I was grateful for it. I finally spotted her, the undeniable center of gravity in the swirling chaos. She was holding court in the middle of the room, a circle of admirers hanging on her every word. She was radiant, laughing with her head thrown back, a sparkling drink in one hand. Her other hand rested possessively on the chest of her boyfriend, Ryder. He was the king to her queen, the star quarterback with a jawline that could cut glass and an ego to match. He exuded a brand of effortless arrogance that our entire campus seemed to find irresistible. He caught my eye over Scarlett's shoulder as I approached. His easy smile tightened for a fraction of a second, his eyes flicking over me with a look of faint, bored annoyance. Then, as if I were nothing more than a piece of furniture, he turned his attention back to the conversation, deliberately excluding me. He hadn't even bothered to nod. My sister, deep in her performance, hadn't noticed my arrival at all. My plan to check in and retreat was failing. Defeated, I changed course, navigating the human obstacle course toward the kitchen. It was a universal party truth: the kitchen was often a safe haven for the socially awkward. I just wanted a bottle of water and 5 minutes of relative peace. But there was no peace to be found. Leaning against the kitchen counter, like a pack of stylish wolves, were Scarlett's lieutenants, Bree, Chloe, and Jessica. They watched me approach, their eyes sharp and critical. Well, look what the cat dragged in," Bree said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. She took a deliberate sip of her brightly colored drink. "Hi, Bree," I managed, forcing a smile. "Great party." "It is, isn't it?" Bree replied, her gaze raking over me from head to toe. Her eyes lingered on my dress. Cute. Very library chic. Chloe and Jessica snickered in perfect sync. The heat of embarrassment crept up my neck. They were blocking the refrigerator, and I knew it was on purpose. I was just trying to get a water, I mumbled, gesturing vaguely behind them. At that moment, Ryder ambled into the kitchen, a proprietary arm sliding around Bree's waist. He was one of those guys who touched every girl in his girlfriend's circle a little too comfortably. He ignored me completely. "Scarlett's looking for you," he said to Bree. Then, as if suddenly remembering I existed, his cold eyes flicked to me. He leaned past me, his body intentionally pressing me against the counter to grab a beer from the fridge. His shoulder bumped mine, hard. "Watch it, Haley," he said, his voice a low, condescending drawl. "Wouldn't want you to get in the way of the fun." He popped the cap off his beer with a flourish and took a long swallow, his eyes locked on mine over the rim of the bottle. The message was crystal clear. "You are an intruder. You are nothing." The party had barely begun, and I already felt like I was suffocating. I finally managed to get a cup of water and made a hasty retreat from the kitchen's hostile territory. I found a relatively quiet spot in the hallway near the back door, which led out to a patio crowded with smokers. From here, I had a clear view of the backyard, where people were dancing under the canopy of string lights my dad had spent 3 hours hanging up last weekend. I leaned against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible, and took a sip of my water. I just had to endure. I pulled out my phone, pretending to be engrossed in a text message, the universal sign for "please don't talk to me." I watched the minutes tick by with agonizing slowness. 10 minutes. 20. 35. Okay, I told myself, another hour and I can reasonably say I've put in my time. I can slip out the back door and no one will even notice. That brief illusion of a successful escape was shattered when I looked up and saw them coming for me. It was Scarlett, with Ryder plastered to her side, and her loyal pack, Bree, Chloe, and Jessica, following close behind. My heart sank. They were moving with a purpose, and their path was aimed directly at me. Scarlett wore a particular smile, one that was all teeth and no warmth. It was her hunting smile, the one that meant she was bored and had decided to create her own entertainment. "There you are," she called out, her voice loud and artificially cheerful, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. I was wondering where my shy little sister was hiding all night. Ryder's arm was draped over her shoulder, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare skin. He was smirking. "Yeah, Haley," he chimed in, his voice oozing condescension. "Don't be so antisocial. We're all family here, right?" I felt trapped, the wall behind me, the predators in front. "I was just getting some air," I said, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. Bree stepped forward, a mischievous glint in her eye. She was holding a plastic cup filled with a viscous, bright red liquid, some kind of sugary jungle juice. She swirled it around, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You look so tense, Haley," she purred. "You really need to loosen up. Have a drink." "No, thanks," I said, shaking my head and taking a half-step sideways, trying to create an escape route. I really should be heading out soon. I have a lot of studying to do for my midterm. "Oh, always with the studying," Scarlett sighed, rolling her eyes for the benefit of her audience. "God, don't be such a colossal drag. It's my 21st birthday. Can't you be fun for just one night?" And then it happened, with a theatricality that felt rehearsed. As I tried to edge past them toward the door, Bree let out a little shriek and tripped forward, lurching directly into me. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated move. The entire contents of her sticky, red cocktail flew through the air in a perfect arc, splashing all over the front of my periwinkle blue dress. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, quickly followed by a wave of snickers and outright laughter. The liquid was shockingly cold against my skin, and it soaked through the fabric instantly, creating a hideous, sprawling stain that looked like a crime scene. "Oops!" Bree giggled, her hand flying to her mouth in a perfect imitation of shock. "Oh my God, Haley, I am so sorry. I'm such a klutz sometimes." I stood there, frozen, staring down at the ruin of my dress. A hot, prickly wave of humiliation washed over me, so intense it made my eyes burn. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me, some laughing, some pitying, all of them witnessing my shame. Scarlett didn't even bother to feign concern. She threw her head back and laughed, a high, piercing sound that felt like a physical blow. "Oh, don't worry about it, Bree," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Honestly, it's an improvement. Red is definitely her color." Ryder, never one to miss an opportunity for cruelty, had already pulled out his phone. The flash went off. "Gotta document this for the gram," he chuckled. Classic Haley. My lungs felt tight, like I couldn't draw a full breath. The laughter, the staring, the sticky mess clinging to my skin, it was too much. Without a word, I turned and fled, pushing my way blindly through the crowd. My vision was blurry with unshed tears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. I stumbled up the crowded staircase, my only coherent thought to find a bathroom, a lockable door, a place where I could hide from the world that had just found me so amusing. But as I would soon find out, there was no hiding from them. The upstairs bathroom was a tiny, windowless room, and the air was thick and humid with the lingering scent of someone's floral hairspray. I fumbled with the old brass knob and slammed the door shut behind me, twisting the lock with a satisfying click. For a moment, I just leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, my whole body trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. I finally straightened up and faced my reflection in the small, medicine cabinet mirror. The girl staring back was a mess. Her face was chalky white, except for the red splotches on her cheeks. Her eyes were wide and swimming with tears. And the dress was a disaster. The vibrant red stain had already started to set, a ghastly, sprawling blemish on the delicate blue fabric. Turning on the cold tap, I grabbed a handful of cheap paper towels and tried to blot at the stain, but it only seemed to spread, turning the blue into an ugly, muddy purple. It was hopeless. The dress was ruined. I was ruined. Frustrated, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the hot tears that were threatening to spill over. I just needed to breathe. I just needed a minute. A sharp, authoritative knock on the door made my entire body jolt. "Haley? Let us in." It was Scarlett's voice, stripped of all its fake cheerfulness, now cold and commanding. "Go away," I choked out, my voice thick with tears. The handle rattled violently. "Don't be such a baby. We know you're in there. Open the door." I wrapped my arms around myself and stayed silent, praying they would give up and leave. But I should have known better. A second later, I heard the telltale scraping of metal on metal. Scarlett kept a spare key for this bathroom on the top of the doorframe. The lock clicked open, and the door swung inward. Scarlett stood there, a triumphant smirk on her face. Ryder was right behind her, his large frame filling the rest of the doorway. And behind them, like vultures circling, were Bree, Chloe, and Jessica. They spilled into the tiny room, a wave of expensive perfume and smug energy. The space instantly felt claustrophobic, suffocating. There was no escape. "Ah, is baby sister crying?" Scarlett cooed, her voice a weapon of condescending pity. She took a slow step towards me, her eyes glittering with a chilling sort of pleasure. She was enjoying this. "You are just so pathetic. You know that, right? You come to my party, a party I didn't even want you at, you stand around like a sad little wallflower making everyone uncomfortable, and then you pull this ridiculous stunt just to get some attention." "I didn't pull a stunt," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Bree threw her drink on me. You saw it." Ryder let out a low, ugly laugh. He raised his phone again, the camera's lens a cold, black eye pointed directly at my face. The flash went off, a harsh, blinding strobe in the small room. "Sure she did," he sneered. "Everyone saw you make a scene. Now smile for the camera, Haley. We're making memories here." "Stop it," I begged, turning my head away, trying to shield my face with my hands. "Please, just leave me alone." My plea only seemed to energize them. That's when Chloe and Jessica moved in. One on each side, they each grabbed one of my arms, their acrylic nails digging into my skin. Their grips were shockingly strong. I tried to pull away, to twist out of their grasp, but it was useless. They were holding me fast, my back pressed hard against the cold, tiled wall. I was completely trapped. Bree stepped forward, a fresh cup of the same red poison in her hand. She had a smile on her face that was all teeth. "You know, my sister was right," she said, her voice a silky threat. "Red really is your color. It makes your eyes pop." And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she tipped the cup. The cold, sticky liquid cascaded over my head. It ran down my hair, plastering it to my scalp. It streamed into my eyes, stinging them so badly I cried out. It dripped down my face, down my neck, soaking the collar of my already ruined dress. Through the red, blurry haze, I could see them all. Chloe and Jessica, laughing. Bree, looking immensely proud of herself. Ryder, still filming, his grin wide and predatory. And Scarlett. Scarlett was just standing back, watching it all unfold, a small, perfectly serene smile on her face. She looked like an artist admiring her masterpiece. "Nobody's ever going to believe you, anyway," Scarlett said, her voice calm and level, as if she were discussing the weather. "You probably did this to yourself for attention. You know you've always had a flair for the dramatic." Her words were the final twist of the knife, designed to make me question my own sanity. I just stood there, dripping and shivering, pinned like an insect for their amusement. In that moment, surrounded by their cackling laughter and the cold, unblinking eye of Ryder's phone, I had never felt so utterly, completely, and hopelessly alone. The world had shrunk to the size of this tiny, tiled room, and in it, I was nothing. Just when I thought the nightmare had reached its peak, a new voice cut through the cacophony of their laughter, sharp and bewildered. "What in God's name is going on in here?" My mother. She was standing in the doorway, her purse clutched in her hand, her face a perfect mask of confusion and maternal disapproval. For one wild, desperate, hopelessly naive second, a surge of relief washed over me. "She's here. She'll stop them. She'll see what they're doing and she'll finally, protect me." That fragile hope was annihilated the instant Scarlett opened her mouth. In a feat of emotional gymnastics that would have earned her an Oscar, Scarlett's entire demeanor shifted. Her cruel smirk vanished, replaced by a look of wide-eyed, trembling fear. She rushed to her mother's side, grabbing her arm. "Mom, thank God you're here!" Scarlett cried, her voice wobbling with expertly faked distress. She pointed a shaking finger at me, my sister, the girl currently dripping with red punch and pinned against a wall. "Look at her. Haley's trying to ruin my party. She showed up drunk, and she's been making a scene all night. We were trying to get her to clean up, to calm down, but she just lost it. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's doing this to ruin my special night." I stared at her, my mind reeling. The lie was so complete, so audacious, it was almost brilliant. My mouth opened to protest, to scream the truth, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. I was still trapped, with Ryder quickly and discreetly pocketing his phone. My mother's eyes, wide with alarm, flickered from Scarlett's beautifully distressed face to my pathetic, disheveled state. I waited. I held my breath, praying she would see the truth that was written all over the scene. I waited for her to question why Bree was holding an empty cup, why Chloe and Jessica had been holding my arms, why Ryder looked so smug. I waited for her to be a mother. Instead, she turned the full force of her gaze on me, and her expression morphed into one I knew better than my own reflection. It was pure, unadulterated disappointment. The same look I'd received when my grades were only A- instead of A's, the same look I got when I chose a book over a school dance. It was the look that said, "You are, once again, a problem." "Haley, what is wrong with you?" she sighed, her voice heavy with a weary exasperation that was somehow more painful than shouting. It was as if I were a burden she simply couldn't bear any longer. Why can't you just for once in your life try to get along with your sister? The sheer, staggering injustice of it stole the air from my lungs. Mom, that's not what happened, I started, my voice cracking. They poured it on me. Scarlett watched them do it. Oh, stop it, Mom snapped, her voice low and sharp, cutting me off before I could say another word. Stop trying to blame everyone else for your own behavior. I can smell the alcohol from here. You are embarrassing this family. You are embarrassing me. She strode over to the towel rack, ripped a clean hand towel from the bar, and threw it at my chest. It was a gesture of disgust. Don't embarrass your sister on her special day, she hissed, her voice a furious whisper meant only for me as she leaned in close. Her breath was hot against my cheek. Do you hear me? Just clean yourself up, go out the back door, and go home. And then you are going to call your sister tomorrow and apologize. Act like nothing happened. She didn't spare me another glance. She turned, put a comforting, protective arm around Scarlett's shoulders, and began murmuring soothing words to her, leading her out of the bathroom as if Scarlett were the one who had just been assaulted. Ryder, Bree, and the others followed them out, a loyal procession. As they left, Bree cast one last triumphant, mocking glance back at me. The door clicked shut, plunging the room into a sudden, heavy silence. I was alone again. But this aloneness was different. It was a profound, bottomless void. It was the crushing, soul-deep certainty that the one person in the world who was supposed to be my safe harbor had just witnessed me drowning and handed my attacker a life raft. I slowly slid down the cold, tiled wall until I was sitting on the floor, the damp towel a useless heap in my lap. The party raged on downstairs, its happy, muffled from a grotesque counterpoint to the silent scream trapped in my chest. Time ceased to have meaning as I sat on that cold, damp bathroom floor. I might have been there for 20 minutes or an hour. The sounds of the party downstairs eventually started to thin out as people began to leave, but I didn't move. I was paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. Eventually, the deep, seeping cold from the tiles worked its way into my bones, and I knew I couldn't stay there forever. With stiff, aching limbs, I pulled myself up, using the sink for support. I deliberately avoided my own reflection in the mirror. I couldn't bear to see the girl looking back at me. I used a wad of paper towels to dry my hair and face as best I could, then I unlocked the door and crept out into the now quiet hallway. My escape was embarrassingly easy. I tiptoed down the back staircase, my shoes squelching softly with each step. I slipped out a side door that led into the dark, wet grass of the backyard. I didn't look back. I just started walking, a mile-and-a-half trek back to my dorm in the chilly October night, my ruined, sticky dress clinging to my skin like a second, shameful layer. The walk was a blur of streetlights and shadows, my mind blessedly, mercifully blank. Back in the safety of my room, the silence was a balm. I peeled off the disgusting dress, my fingers fumbling with the zipper. I dropped it in a heap in the corner of my closet, wanting it out of my sight. It was a sad, stained symbol of the entire night. I stepped into the shower and turned the water on as hot as I could possibly stand it, scrubbing at my skin until it was red and raw, trying to wash away more than just the sticky residue of the cocktail. I was trying to wash away the feeling of their hands on me, the sound of their laughter in my ears, the ice in my mother's eyes. It didn't work. I finally crawled into bed, shivering despite the warmth of my comforter, and pulled the covers up to my chin. But sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach. I just lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, my mind now a relentless projector, replaying the night's events in a horrific, endless loop. Every cruel word, every mocking smile, every detail was seared into my memory. I felt hollowed out, a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. Sometime around 2 a.m., my phone, which I had tossed onto my nightstand and forgotten about, buzzed weakly. It was probably a text from my mom, a follow-up command to apologize to Scarlett. The thought of reading her words made me feel sick. I almost ignored it, but then it buzzed again, insistent. With a heavy, weary sigh, I reached for it, my thumb hovering over the screen. It wasn't my mom. It was a message from an unknown number. My brow furrowed in confusion. I tapped it open. The message was cryptic, just 5 words, "They think no one saw." My heart, which had been beating a slow, funereal rhythm, gave a sudden, hard thump. Before I could even begin to process what that could possibly mean, a second message came through. It was a video file. My thumb trembled as I pressed play. The video flickered to life. It was shaky, filmed from a strange, low angle, as if from behind the wicker laundry hamper I vaguely remembered being in the corner of the bathroom. But the quality of the audio and video was horrifyingly clear. It showed everything. It showed Chloe and Jessica grabbing my arms with practiced ease. It showed Bree's vicious smile just before she poured the drink over my head. It showed Ryder, his phone up, gleefully filming the entire spectacle. And worst of all, it showed Scarlett, standing back from the fray, watching my degradation with a look of cool, detached satisfaction. The video didn't stop there. It kept rolling, capturing the moment my mother walked in, Scarlett's instantaneous transformation into a blubbering victim, and my mother's swift, brutal dismissal of me. It was all there. A complete, undeniable, third-party record of the truth. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. Who could have possibly filmed this? Someone else had been in there, completely hidden from view. Another text popped up, the words glowing in the darkroom. Ryder posted his version on a private story. "It's 15 seconds long and makes you look crazy. He's telling everyone you were drunk and made a fool of yourself." Of course he did. They wrote the history. They controlled the narrative. They always had. Then, the final message appeared, the one that would change everything. Scarlett and Ryder post their perfect lives on social media every day for the world to see. Maybe it's time people saw the truth behind the filter. Want to make them famous? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For 20 years, I had been the family's shock absorber. I was the one who stayed quiet, who didn't make waves, who swallowed the casual cruelty and pretended it didn't hurt because that was my assigned role. I was the daughter who was supposed to remain in the shadows so the other one could shine all the more brightly. All of it, every swallowed insult, every ignored accomplishment, every lonely holiday, it all coalesced into this single, pivotal moment. I thought about my mother's final, hissed words. "Don't embarrass your sister." I thought about Scarlett's serene, triumphant laugh. I thought about the predatory look on Ryder's face. I took a deep, shaky breath, the first full breath I'd taken in hours. My fingers, now steady, moved across the screen. I typed my reply. 2 simple, powerful words. Do it. Little did I know, that 2-word text message was not an ending. It was the lighting of a fuse, and the explosion would be big enough to shatter our picture-perfect family image forever. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay awake in bed, my phone clutched in my hand like a talisman, my mind a whirlwind of fear and a strange, unfamiliar flicker of excitement. I was terrified of the fallout, but a part of me, a part one had suppressed for years, was desperate to see what would happen when the truth was finally set free. The weekend passed in a slow, agonizing crawl. I stayed in my dorm room, feigning a sudden illness to my roommate. I ignored the barrage of calls and texts from my mother, each one escalating from demanding to furious. "Call me this instant, Haley. Your sister is very upset. This behavior is unacceptable. You will apologize." I couldn't face her. I couldn't pretend. I lived in a state of suspended animation, constantly refreshing the university student forum and other social media, waiting. By Sunday night, a sick feeling of doubt had begun to set in. Maybe it was an elaborate, cruel prank. Maybe I had imagined the entire exchange. Monday morning arrived not with a whimper, but with a digital roar that shook the very foundations of my world. I was startled awake not by my 7:30 a.m. alarm, but by the incessant, frantic buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. It wasn't just a single buzz, it was a continuous, vibrating hum. I squinted at the blindingly bright screen, my heart immediately hammering against my ribs. I had hundreds of notifications. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize. A flood of direct messages on Instagram. Dozens of tags on Twitter. My hands shaking, I navigated to the university's main online student forum. And there it was. Pinned to the top of the page. Someone, my anonymous ally, had done more than just dump the video. They had edited it with the skill of a professional propagandist. The video began with a glossy, sun-drenched montage of photos and short clips from Scarlett's and Ryder's own Instagram stories from the party. There they were, smiling, kissing, raising a toast with their friends. They looked like royalty. The caption "The King and Queen of Campus" was superimposed over the images. Then, with a jarring, violent cut and the sound of screeching static, the footage switched to the raw, shaky, horrifying video from the bathroom. My assault, in all its ugly, undeniable glory. The post was simply titled, "Meet the Real King and Queen of Oak Valley University." It had exploded overnight. It was everywhere. It had been shared thousands of times, spreading from the university forum to Twitter, to Facebook parent groups, to local news tip lines. The comment section was a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated outrage. This isn't a prank. This is assault. They should be expelled. Her own sister just stood there and watched? That is pure evil. And the mom? What kind of mother does that to her own child? Unbelievable. I always knew Ryder was a scumbag. Glad everyone else can see it now. Does anyone know who the girl in the video is? Is she okay? I felt a dizzying, surreal mix of terror and profound vindication. It was out. The secret was out, and it wasn't my secret to carry alone anymore. My walk to my first class of the day, Introduction to Psychology, was one of the strangest experiences of my life. Normally, I moved across campus with an invisibility cloak I had perfected over the years. People looked right through me. But today, heads turned as I walked past. Whispers followed me down the long, oak-lined path. But for the first time in my life, the whispers weren't about my awkwardness or my famous sister. They were whispers of sympathy, of outrage on my behalf. A girl from my English class, someone I'd never spoken to beyond a polite hello, stopped me in the hallway outside the lecture hall. Her face was creased with concern. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice kind. "I'm Jessica. I saw the video. I just wanted to say I am so sorry that happened to you. That was completely messed up." I was so stunned by the unsolicited kindness that I could only manage a choked, "Thank you." My eyes burned with a different kind of tears. By lunchtime, the university's official social media pages were being bombarded with comments from students, alumni, and even parents, all demanding the administration take immediate action. The story had taken on a life of its own. It was bigger than me now. It was a referendum on the culture of privilege and bullying that had been allowed to fester just beneath the university's pristine surface for years. Scarlett and Ryder had belatedly made their profiles private, but the damage was done. The digital dam had broken. The video was saved, reposted, and mirrored everywhere. They had nowhere left to hide. Their carefully curated world of popularity and power was burning to the ground, and the inferno was just getting started. Late that afternoon, as I was trying to force myself to eat a sandwich in the campus library, an official-looking email landed in my inbox. The subject line made my blood run cold: urgent meeting request from the Office of the Dean of Student Conduct. They wanted to see me in 1 hour. And, the email noted, they had already summoned my sister. The Office of Student Conduct was located in a stern, ivy-covered brick building that looked like it had been built for the express purpose of holding grim, serious meetings. My hands were so clammy I had to wipe them on my jeans before I could pull open the heavy oak door. The receptionist behind the glass partition gave me a sad, knowing look and gestured toward a closed door down the hall without my even having to say my name. My heart was pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs as I knocked. A firm voice said, come in. When I entered the office, I saw they were already there. Scarlett was slumped in a chair, her face puffy and blotchy from crying, her usual glamorous makeup a smudged mess. Beside her, sitting ramrod straight, was my mother. Her face was a pale, tight mask of fury. The look she shot me as I entered the room was pure venom. It said, without a single word, "You did this." At the head of a large, polished mahogany table sat Dean Albright. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that I found strangely reassuring. She gestured for me to take the empty seat across from my sister, creating a perfect triangle of family dysfunction. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice, Haley," she said, her voice even but firm. "As you can imagine, this is a very serious situation." She folded her hands on the table, her gaze sweeping over the three of us. Bullying, harassment, and assault are zero-tolerance offenses at this university. We take them very, very seriously. "It was just a simple misunderstanding," my mother began immediately, her voice strained and artificially bright. "The girls were just having a little fun. A silly party prank that got out of hand. These things happen in college." Dean Albright held up a single, elegant hand, and the gesture had the immediate effect of silencing my mother. "Mrs. Evans, with all due respect, I have watched the unedited, 3-minute video at least a dozen times. What I saw was not silly fun. I saw 4 students physically restraining and assaulting another student. The fact that this happened at an off-campus residence is irrelevant. They are all students here, and they are all bound by our code of conduct." Scarlett's head snapped up, a spark of her old defiance flaring in her red-rimmed eyes. "It wasn't assault," she cried, her voice rising with indignation. "We were just joking around. Haley is always so sensitive. She can't take a joke. She ruined my party by overreacting." "Fun?" The word came out of my own mouth, louder and colder than I had intended. All 3 of them turned to look at me. For the first time, I didn't shrink under their collective gaze. I looked directly at my sister. "You thought that was fun?" I asked, my voice shaking not with fear, but with a surge of long-suppressed anger. "You held me down. Your boyfriend filmed it while your friends attacked me. And you were planning to post it yourself to humiliate me. Please, Scarlett, explain to me which part of that was the joke?" A flicker of genuine shock crossed Scarlett's face. She wasn't accustomed to me fighting back, especially not in front of an authority figure. Dean Albright turned her attention to her computer monitor. "What Haley is referring to," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is a pattern of behavior." She clicked her mouse, and a large screen on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't just the bathroom video. It was a meticulously compiled presentation. Someone, my ally, had sent the dean a complete dossier. It included screenshots of Ryder's private story, a half-dozen other short clips of them mocking and harassing other students, and links to social media posts where they cyberbullied people in the comments. It was a damning, irrefutable record of their reign of terror. "We have received over 50 emails from students, parents, and alumni since this video surfaced this morning," the dean continued, her eyes fixed on my mother. "Many of them have come forward with their own stories about your daughter and her associates. This was not an isolated incident." My mother's face had gone completely white. "Surely, there must be something we can do," she stammered, her composure finally beginning to crack. "Scarlett has her whole future ahead of her. We've invested so much in her college fund, you can't just." "A student's future is determined by their actions," Dean Albright finished, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Scarlett Evans, Ryder Johnson, Bree Miller, Chloe Davis, and Jessica Smith are all suspended, effective immediately. They are barred from campus pending a full hearing by the university's disciplinary board. And I assure you, Mrs. Evans, this will be reflected on their permanent academic records, regardless of the outcome of that hearing." Scarlett let out a choked sob. "This isn't fair. Someone set us up. They filmed us without our permission. Like you filmed me? I asked again, my voice quiet but clear in the silent room. Like you film everyone who doesn't fit into your perfect little world? Before Scarlett could respond, a phone buzzed on the table. Then another. Then mine. I glanced down. It was a news alert from a local TV station. The headline glowed on my screen: Oak Valley University bullies exposed in viral video. Social media royalty revealed as cruel tormentors. My mother's carefully maintained composure finally shattered. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a desperate, misplaced fury. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment I saw with perfect clarity that she and Scarlett were carved from the same stone, more concerned with the shiny illusion of perfection than with the ugly reality of pain. "You mean what you've done to our family?" My own voice rose, stronger and clearer with each word. "By always choosing her over me? Every single time she hurt me, you told me to be quiet. You told me not to make waves. You told me to think about the family image." I stood up then, my hands flat on the polished table, leaning forward. "Well, Mom, the image is broken. It's shattered. And you cannot blame me for the cracks that you helped create." The office was dead silent. Even Scarlett had stopped crying, her mouth hanging slightly open in disbelief. Dean Albright cleared her throat, breaking the tense silence. "Mrs. Evans, I must admit, I am also deeply concerned about the home situation this video reveals. As such, I am mandating that the university's chief counselor speak with both of your daughters. Separately." "That won't be necessary," my mother began, her voice tight. But I cut her off. I looked directly at the dean, my chin held high. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and firm, "I would like that very much." For the first time in my entire life, I watched my mother's legendary control slip completely. She couldn't smile this away. She couldn't smooth it over with a dismissive laugh or a quick excuse. The truth was out, ugly and undeniable, and for the first time, it was hers to deal with, not mine to hide. Leaving the dean's office felt like stepping out of a pressurized cabin into the open air. I could finally breathe. My mother and Scarlett stalked ahead of me down the hallway, a thundercloud of silent fury. As I fumbled in my bag for my keys, my phone buzzed with another message from my unknown ally. "Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine despite the newfound strength I felt. "Phase 2? Up ahead, Scarlett, who was walking a few feet in front of me with our mother, suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. She turned back to glare at me, her eyes narrowed with pure, undiluted hatred. "I hope you're happy," she spat, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "You've ruined everything." I thought about all the birthdays she had ruined with a cruel comment, the friendships she had sabotaged out of jealousy, the countless times she had chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt like nothing. Always with that same satisfied smirk she'd worn in the bathroom. "No, Scarlett," I replied, my voice clear and loud enough for our mother to hear. "I'm just getting started." I looked down at my phone and quickly typed my response. "What's Phase 2? The reply was instantaneous. The truth about what really happened during freshman orientation week last year. "I have that footage, too." I saw Scarlett's step falter. She had obviously received some kind of warning message on her own phone at the exact same moment, because her shoulders, which had been rigid with anger, suddenly tensed with what looked like genuine fear. A knot of dread and curiosity formed in my stomach. What could possibly be worse than what they had already done to me? I found out 2 agonizingly long days later. The new video dropped on Wednesday. This one didn't appear on any student forum. My anonymous ally was more strategic this time. They sent the video file directly to Dean Albright's office, the editor of the campus newspaper, and the lead reporter at the local news station who had been covering the story. Unlike the party footage, this video was darker, both literally and figuratively. It was filmed at night, in a poorly lit basement, during what was clearly a hazing ritual for a secret, unsanctioned co-ed social club that Ryder ran. The video, which was terrifyingly long, showed Scarlett and Ryder leading a group of upperclassmen in tormenting a terrified-looking freshman boy. They were forcing him to drink, but it wasn't just beer. They were making him chug from a bottle of cheap, potent liquor, laughing and cheering as he sputtered and choked. The boy was clearly distressed, begging them to stop, slurring his words, saying he had an allergy and couldn't drink like that. They just laughed harder, calling him a lightweight and a loser. The video ended with a sickening thud as the boy collapsed to the floor, his body convulsing, struggling to breathe. The campus newspaper published the story an hour after the video was leaked, alongside a heart-wrenching statement from the boy's family. He had a rare, severe alcohol allergy. He had gone into anaphylactic shock and had been hospitalized for 3 days, nearly dying. His parents had wanted to press charges at the time, but the university, desperate to avoid a major scandal that could affect their alumni donations and recruitment, had persuaded them to handle the matter internally. The university's quiet, confidential solution had been to give Ryder and Scarlett a meaningless slap on the wrist and officially disband the social club, which, of course, just continued to operate in secret. They had covered the whole thing up. I was at my parents' house when the story broke. My mom had insisted I come home for a few nights to sort this family mess out, which really meant she wanted me where she could control me. I was in the kitchen, making myself a sandwich, when I heard a sharp crack followed by the sound of shattering glass. I rushed into the living room to see my mother standing frozen in the middle of the room, her phone in her hand, her face ashen. The coffee mug she had been holding lay in 1,000 pieces at her feet. My dad, for the first time since this whole ordeal began, actually looked up from the perpetual shield of his newspaper, his face a mask of disbelief. "Our daughter could be charged with felony assault," my mother whispered, her voice a trembling, horrified thread of sound. "Maybe even attempted manslaughter." The boy's parents, their lawyer just contacted the university. Now that there's video proof, they're pressing charges. Just then, Scarlett stormed into the room from upstairs, her face a mess of running mascara and rage. "It wasn't like that," she shrieked, her voice raw and panicked. "We didn't know he was really allergic. He was lying for attention. He was being dramatic." "The video shows him telling you he was allergic, Scarlett," Dad spoke, his voice unusually sharp and cutting. "You laughed in his face and called him a drama queen just before you made him take another drink." I stood in the doorway, a silent witness to the complete and utter implosion of my family. This wasn't about a ruined reputation or a tarnished college record anymore. This was criminal. This could mean jail time. This could mean a lawsuit that would financially cripple them, a prospect far more terrifying to my parents than social shame. Their carefully constructed world, Scarlett's bright future, their comfortable retirement, the inheritance they were counting on, it was all teetering on the brink of annihilation. My mother's panicked eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route, and then they landed on me. Her desperation was a palpable force in the room. She rushed towards me, her hands grabbing my upper arms with a painful grip. "Haley, this has to stop," she pleaded, her voice a raw, ragged whisper. "You must know who is doing this. Who is sending these videos. You have to find them and make them stop. You're destroying this family. You're destroying your sister's life." Hearing that final, insane accusation, that after everything, she still saw me as the destroyer, not the victim, something inside me didn't break. It solidified. The last vestiges of fear, of hurt, of the desperate childhood need for her approval, it all vanished, burned away and replaced by a strange, cold calm. I looked at her desperate, tear-streaked face, and I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. She was right about one thing. The family was being destroyed. But I wasn't the one holding the hammer. I was just the one who had finally been brave enough to turn on the lights. If you're still listening, if this story resonates with you at all, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you're here, that you've given me a like, and that you're walking with me on this journey. Your support means more than you can possibly imagine. It gives me strength. Please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The days that followed were a chaotic blur of legal panic and suffocating tension. My dad, who had spent most of my life hiding behind the business section of the newspaper, was now constantly on the phone with a high-priced lawyer. I would overhear snippets of hushed, strained conversations from the hallway. Words like settlement, liability, and mitigation floated through the house like toxic spores. My mother walked around like a ghost in a cashmere sweater, her face pale and drawn, occasionally bursting into tears before locking herself in her bedroom. And Scarlett was a caged animal, pacing her room, refusing to eat, alternating between hysterical sobbing and furious, screamed accusations directed at her bedroom walls. The perfect family was gone, replaced by 3 terrified, unraveling strangers and me, the silent, watchful eye of their hurricane. The final, decisive blow to Scarlett and Ryder's crumbling empire didn't come from my anonymous ally, or the university, or even the legal system. It came from their own inner circle, a classic tale of rats deserting a sinking ship. Faced with their own expulsions, the very real threat of being named as accessories in a criminal investigation, and immense pressure from their own wealthy and influential parents, who were horrified at the thought of their family names being dragged through a messy public lawsuit, Bree, Chloe, and Jessica made a cold, calculated decision. They chose self-preservation. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the party, they executed their plan. They held a press conference. It was a shockingly bold and brilliant move. They didn't hide. They did it right on the main steps of the university library, a symbolic and highly visible location. They had a reporter from the local news station there, along with the student editor of the campus paper. Their parents stood behind them, a united front of grim-faced, supportive adults, with a sleek-looking lawyer quietly advising them off to the side. I watched the live stream on my laptop from the safety of my dorm room, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Bree, her face a perfect mask of practiced remorse and her hair impeccably styled, stepped up to the microphone first. "We are here today to make a statement and to offer our most sincere and unreserved apology," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We want to apologize to Haley Evans, to the student from last year who was so terribly harmed, and to any other student who has been hurt by the toxic culture we were a part of. We participated in a pattern of abuse, and there is no excuse for our actions." She paused, taking a dramatic, deep breath. "But we also feel it is our moral duty to tell the truth about who is at the center of this pattern. For years, we, and many others, have been part of a toxic social circle that was created and controlled by Scarlett Evans and Ryder Johnson." It was breathtaking. One by one, they took turns at the microphone, confessing everything. They painted a chillingly detailed picture of Scarlett as a master manipulator, a social puppeteer who orchestrated years of bullying, choosing targets she deemed weak, weird, or otherwise unworthy. They described Ryder as her enforcer, the muscle who used threats and intimidation to keep everyone in line. They admitted, their voices cracking with what seemed like genuine fear, that Scarlett and Ryder had blackmailed them and others into participation, holding their own secrets and insecurities over their heads like a guillotine. "She told us that if we didn't help her, she'd destroy our lives," Chloe said, tears welling in her eyes as she spoke. "She knew things about our families, about our grades, about mistakes we'd made. She used it all against us. But we can't live with the guilt anymore. We can't be her puppets." What happened to Haley was the last straw. My phone started ringing while the press conference was still live. It was my mother. I looked at her name on the screen and hit decline. The story was out now. The whole, ugly, unvarnished truth. Scarlett wasn't just a popular mean girl, she was a calculated, emotional predator. Ryder wasn't just an arrogant jock, he was her willing accomplice. My dad told me later that Scarlett had been watching the live feed from her bedroom window. When she saw her so-called best friends betraying her on camera for the whole world to see, she let out a sound he described as something inhuman. He said she just started screaming, over and over. "Traitors! I'll ruin you all. I'll ruin every single one of you. But her threats were empty now. They were the desperate howls of a deposed queen. She had no power left. Her soldiers had deserted her, her secrets were exposed, and her kingdom had irrevocably fallen. The public confession by Scarlett's former friends was the final nail in the coffin. The university, which was already facing a massive lawsuit and a public relations nightmare of epic proportions, now had all the ammunition it needed to act decisively and, more importantly, to be seen acting decisively. The story was no longer just about a viral video, it was about a documented, long-term pattern of systemic bullying and abuse that the administration had previously swept under the rug. They had no choice but to bring the hammer down. Dean Albright scheduled a final, public announcement for the following Monday morning. The atmosphere on campus was electric with anticipation. The announcement was held in one of the largest lecture halls on campus, and it was packed to the rafters with students, faculty, and a surprising number of local media outlets with their cameras and microphones. I decided to go. I needed to see it through to the end. I found a seat in the very back row, feeling strangely detached, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. Dean Albright walked to the podium, her expression grim and resolute. She didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Following a thorough and expedited investigation by the university's disciplinary board, she announced, her voice resonating with authority through the cavernous hall, and in light of new, corroborated testimony from multiple students, the university has made its final decision. Effective immediately, Scarlett Evans and Ryder Johnson are hereby permanently expelled from this institution. A wave of sound, a mixture of applause, shocked murmurs, and the rapid-fire clicking of camera shutters, swept through the hall. Expelled. It was the academic death penalty. It was over. Really, truly over. A profound sense of peace washed over me, a quiet, final release of a tension I had been carrying for years. The monster had been vanquished. As the crowd began to stir and file out of the hall, my eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene. And that's when I saw her. A quiet girl with a cascade of dark hair and a professional-looking camera hanging around her neck was standing near the exit, calmly observing the chaos. It was Megan, a junior from the journalism department. She was a familiar campus fixture, known for being the lead photographer for the yearbook and the student newspaper. She was one of those people who was always present at every major event, yet seemed to blend into the background. She was everywhere, and at the same time, nowhere. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She held my gaze for a long moment, then gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't just a nod of acknowledgement. It was a nod of confirmation. And in that instant, everything clicked into place with a sudden, stunning clarity. The mysterious ally. The perfectly captured, secret footage from a hidden angle in the bathroom. The strategic, escalating release of information. The meticulously compiled dossier of evidence sent directly to the dean. It had been her. It had been Megan all along. An invisible observer, just like me, who had finally decided to turn her camera into a weapon for justice. Later that afternoon, she found me sitting alone at a small table in the campus coffee shop. She walked over, not with any fanfare, but with a quiet confidence. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from me. "It's all yours," I said, my heart beating a little faster. She sat down, placing her heavy camera on the table between us. We sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you," I said finally. It felt ridiculously inadequate, but it was all I could think to say. She shrugged, a small, wry smile playing on her lips. "I saw you that night at the party, before everything went down. You were standing by the back door, looking so lost. You reminded me of myself my freshman year." Her smile faded, and her eyes took on a distant, haunted look. Scarlett and her friends made my first year here a living hell. I was one of their projects. They made fun of my clothes, my scholarship, everything. I was too afraid and too ashamed to do anything about it back then. Her gaze became focused again, and it was filled with a steely resolve. I decided I wasn't going to be afraid anymore. I'm a journalism major. My job is to document the truth. So, I started documenting everything. I gathered string for over a year. Your story, what they did to you, is just so blatant, so cruel. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Why didn't you tell me it was you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why let me think I was alone? She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious and kind. Because you needed to do this for yourself. You needed to stand up to them, to your mother, to the dean, without knowing you had a secret safety net. You needed to find your own voice, Haley. And you did. It was amazing to watch. She was right. Every terrifying step I had taken, replying to her text, walking into the dean's office, confronting my mother, it had all been my choice. My voice. My strength. Megan hadn't been my savior. She had just been the one who had quietly slipped me the sword and shield I needed to save myself. The aftermath of Scarlett's and Ryder's expulsion was a messy, complicated affair. Ryder lost his football scholarship, which was the only reason he was at Oak Valley in the first place, and quietly transferred to a community college back in his hometown. The lawsuit from the freshman boy's family was settled out of court for a sum that, I later learned, forced my parents to sell their beloved vacation home and tap into their retirement funds. It was a significant financial blow, the kind of tangible consequence they could understand far better than emotional pain. Scarlett, facing the very real possibility of criminal charges, accepted a plea deal brokered by her expensive lawyer. It involved a 2-year probationary period, hundreds of hours of mandatory community service, and, most significantly, enrollment in a long-term behavioral rehabilitation program in another state. As for me, life began to change in ways that were both subtle and profound. The whispers on campus didn't stop, but their tone shifted from shocked gossip to something resembling respect. People didn't just look at me anymore, they saw me. Other students, quiet ones like me who had also been targets of Scarlett's reign of terror, started approaching me. They would stop me in the library or after class and share their own stories in hushed, hesitant voices. We formed a small, unlikely community, a quiet sorority of survivors. I went from being Scarlett's ghost sister to being Haley. I started making real friends, genuine friends, who liked me for my quiet nature and my love of sociology textbooks, not despite it. The biggest, and most difficult, change, however, was at home. As part of the settlement agreement, the court had mandated that my parents attend family counseling, both with and without me. The first few sessions were excruciating. They were a painful dance of blame, denial, and deep-seated resentment. My mother was defensive, my father was silent, and I was filled with a white-hot, righteous anger. Our therapist was a patient, perceptive woman who slowly, painstakingly, began to chip away at the decades of dysfunction. She helped my parents see that Scarlett's cruelty hadn't developed in a vacuum. It had been nurtured and enabled by their own obsession with image and success, and by their casual, consistent neglect of their other child. Slowly, ever so slowly, things began to shift. My dad actually started putting down his newspaper when I spoke to him, looking me in the eye. My mom, in a Herculean effort, began to learn the difference between hearing and actually listening. Our relationship is still a work in progress. It's not perfect. It may never be. The scars from 20 years of being the lesser child don't fade overnight. But for the first time in my life, it feels honest. We are no longer performing our roles in the play of the perfect family. We are just 3 broken people trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together. A few months ago, we had one of our newly instituted weekly family dinners. It was awkward, as it always is, but we were trying. Scarlett attended via a video call from her program facility. The change in her was startling. The arrogant, defiant queen bee was gone, replaced by a young woman who looked smaller, younger, and deeply tired. The fire in her eyes had been banked, leaving behind a bed of weary embers. "I'm sorry, Haley," she said, her voice quiet and stripped of its usual manipulative cadence. She looked directly at the camera, and for the first time, I felt like she was actually seeing me. For everything. For the party. For all of it. There's no excuse. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't erase the years of torment. But it was a start. My mom, sitting next to me at the table, reached for my hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "We're sorry, too, Haley," she said, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We are so sorry. We should have seen what was happening. We should have protected you." I looked at my mother's face, at my father's, both etched with a new, unfamiliar humility. And then I thought of Megan's words, about finding my own voice. "No," I replied, my voice steady and clear. "I needed to learn how to protect myself. But now that I have, maybe we can all learn how to be a real family." It wasn't a perfect, fairy tale ending. But it was a real one. And sometimes, real is so much better than perfect. The videos are still out there, floating in the digital ether. They are a permanent, public reminder that the truth, no matter how ugly or how long it's been buried, always finds its way to the light. And that even the quietest voice, when it finally decides to speak its truth, can be loud enough to bring down kingdoms. Thank you so much for listening to my whole story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If you've ever felt invisible, or unheard, or been made to feel small, please know that you are not alone. Share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments below, if you feel comfortable. Your story matters. And if you haven't already, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Sharing our truths is how we find our strength and how we begin to heal. Thank you.